This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A year-long police investigation has led to voyeurism charges being laid against a Winnipeg chiropractor. It comes after the man was accused of filming patients with hidden cameras disguised as sprinkler heads. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut has the story.
Dr. Robert Stitt was a chiropractor for years, but he's now charged with 8 counts of voyeurism and is suspended from practicing.
The investigation began in January 2024 after a patient complained to the Manitoba Chiropractors Association. She alleged that Stitt inappropriately touched her back. The regulatory body assigned an investigator to look into it. According to search warrant documents obtained by CBC News, Stitt told the investigator he could prove he did nothing wrong because all of his interactions with his patients were recorded. The documents say, as Stitt was scrolling through video looking for the date and time of the alleged incident, the investigator noticed at least 3 women in various stages of undress.
They called Winnipeg police, who seized 5 fake sprinkler heads that concealed cameras, plus a recording device in the suspended ceiling at Stitt's office. The Chiropractors Association says Stitt was suspended last January, and that will stay in place until his case is heard in court. They also say they're deeply concerned by any criminal charge against a chiropractor, especially when it involves allegations of possible patient harm. Chiropractors don't fall under the same regulations as healthcare workers, but Manitoba's health minister says it's looking at ways to ensure patient safety.
Chiropractors in Manitoba are regulated currently the same way that chiropractors across the country are. They are regulated under the Chiropractic Act. And so we are actively doing the work of evaluating what we can do with that legislation to further protect the public and to improve transparency and accountability.
Stitt's next court date is set for April 1st. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Lawyers for the man found guilty in the first-degree murder of his neighbor in rural Manitoba, say they will appeal the conviction. Yesterday, jury members found Eric Wildman guilty of killing his 40-year-old neighbor, Clifford Joseph. Joseph was reported missing in June 2021. His remains were found more than a month later. Prosecutors say Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle after catching him trying to steal from his property. He then took him to another location and executed him. Wildman's lawyer, Martin Glazer, called the theory absurd. He says they plan to appeal the conviction.
This is just the first round. We're going to keep fighting. And as far as we're concerned, justice was not served today. This is an injustice, and my client maintains his innocence and maintains that he was wrongfully convicted.
The conviction carries an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. They were brought in to help make Canada's oldest ballet company more equitable, diverse, and inclusive as an organization. But today, the Royal Winnipeg Ballet's entire Indigenous Advisory Circle resigned. In a scathing letter sent to the board of directors, the group says they feel their voice and guidance are not valued, instead saying they've been reduced to token status. The group says the ballet's culture is not friendly to Indigenous voices. In addition, they say they've had no direct contact with the board and have not been included in key areas to help advance reconciliation.
Sort of hitting a point of fatigue because we're having the same conversations over and over and over again. We're making these recommendations, but we're doing a lot of the emotional labor. We're asking for Settler Society to do that work. Murray Sinclair, he used to say, we described for you the mountain and we've shown you the path. We're asking you to do the climbing. And I have yet to see that happen at this level.
The RWB board tells CBC it knows there is work to do, saying, quote, "We recommit ourselves to finding the path forward together. We will continue to seek meaningful relationships within the Indigenous community. We will listen and learn from what has been respectfully shared on where we must do better, and we will work with Indigenous advisors and communities on finding new pathways to reconciliation." An endowment fund to help the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls has nearly doubled, thanks to a multi-million-dollar donation. And as Rosanna Hempel reports, it comes before any money has even been handed out.
The faces of missing and murdered loved ones from Manitoba. Families Minister Nahani Fontaine announcing today an endowment fund to help their families heal has grown by $10 million.
I am incredibly proud to announce we have our first major private sector donor.
The donation from the Shoppers Foundation for Women's Health adds to the $15 million already in the fund that the Manitoba government launched last May. Fontaine anticipates the combined $25 million will generate more than $1 million annually, which will go directly to the families of MMIWG and Indigenous-led organizations.
Let's say they have a loved one who's gone missing and they need dollars for searching. They need posters, they need mileage, they need to come into the city. You'll be able to access some of those dollars.
Jerry Pangman says help like this wasn't offered when her family experienced two tragedies. In 2013, her sister, Jennifer McPherson, was murdered in British Columbia.
Our sister's remains were cremated in BC and then sent back home to Winnipeg through Canada Post in the coldest and most inhumane way. My mother had to pick up her daughter's remains with a notification slip,
which Pangman says re-victimized the family all over again. She says having easy access to funds and supports will help children and immediate family members grieve and heal.
Fontaine says the application process for families will open after April 1st. 60% of the funds returned will go to the nonprofit Giganaway to manage and share out to families. The province will distribute the remaining 40% to Indigenous-led events and programming. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Residents in a small northern Manitoba town can't afford the cost of travel for healthcare. Leaf Rapids is about 700 kilometers north of Winnipeg, but without public transport, people usually rely on the good graces of others to find a ride to the hospital. The CBC's Sunuta Ranawake has more.
This clinic has no doctors and only one nurse. That means many patients are either sent to Lynn Lake or Thompson for care. That drive can cost upwards of $300.
And if you don't have that money on you, you have to put your health care aside.
For Victoria Chaboyer, that means she can't go back to work at the daycare. She injured her shoulder after a fall 4 years ago and is still dealing with pain and an inability to lift or pull.
I would love to be working. I would love to be able to pay if I need a ride out, but physically I can't because I can't get the medical attention I need. And I feel so kind of lost.
Mike Nadaways drives people back from the Lynn Lake Hospital about once a month after they've been taken there by an ambulance. He does it on his own dime.
People ask me and I just can't say no to them because people over there that were taken over there by an ambulance, they're stuck over there.
Leaf Rapids has been without a mayor or council since 2019. In 2023, its administration fell to a provincially appointed consulting firm. Rose Moose says she feels forgotten, but is doing what she can to help.
I'm fundraising for us to try and get a medical vehicle, for us to have money for anybody to go to have money for food or $150 to get back.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the Northern Regional Health Authority said the model of care for Leaf Rapids includes virtual and in-person visits at Lynn Lake. The province does not cover return trips after an ambulance ride and reimburses only after the fact for appointments.
Whoever's listening out there, we need help here. We need medical help here and at least transportation.
She says she shouldn't have to choose between food and her health. Sunuta Ranawake, CBC News, Leaf Rapids.
Riley Lachuk in now. And Riley, we are both wearing our shades of red for Valentine's Day, but unfortunately your weather map isn't playing along.
I know. I tried. I'm trying to be a little festive, okay? I don't know if that's the right word.
We're trying.
For the season that we're in. Yeah, I know. It doesn't quite match, but I thought I'd show you the extent of the extreme cold warnings that we're seeing. They've been ebbing and flowing throughout the day today, but do expect, particularly into parts of central and northern Manitoba, that we'll see these in place through the weekend. And we're looking at not just overnight tonight, wind chills -40 or colder into the Parkland region, into central Manitoba, but into the night, into Sunday morning, into Monday morning. So another multi-day where we see some very cold temperatures, frostbite on exposed skin in minutes as we get into the early morning hours. Today, -19 in Winnipeg and Brandon as forecast today, -22 in Thompson this afternoon. As we get through the night tonight, looking at a low of -26. A little bit of cloud cover keeps a bit of heat in to the southern part of the province tonight. Starting with a partly cloudy sky tomorrow, and Brittany up to -19 tomorrow afternoon. I've got some good news in your long-range forecast.
Love it. Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
With continued tariff threats coming from the United States, some Manitoba schools are hitting pause on heading south of the border. We'll have the latest straight ahead. One Manitoba school division is cancelling field trips south of the border in light of growing tensions between Canada and the U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats, combined with changes to U.S. policies that deal with identity and equality, led the division to consider other places for school trips. And as CBC's Mike Arsenault explains, other schools are following suit.
The Seven Oaks School Division is putting the brakes on a school trip that was planned for the United States this year. The superintendent for the division, Tony Kreml, says there were a couple of factors, including the impact of tariffs.
The unpredictability of costs, and primarily for parents recognizing that a cost may be at one point in February of 25, but may be significantly more.
This comes amid economic and political uncertainty south of the border, including policy changes surrounding identity and equality.
When there are executive orders to the point of only recognizing certain people and essentially canceling others, that can certainly provide for an unsafe situation.
Pembina Trails School Division is following in Seven Oaks' footsteps. In an email sent to parents Friday, the division says in part, Pembina Trails School Division is pausing approval of all student field trips to the United States for the remainder of the school year and will reassess prior to the start of the 2025-2026 school year. This decision prioritizes student safety and reaffirms our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Louis Riel School Division says it doesn't have any trips planned for the U.S. this year, but recent developments in the U.S. prompted them to put out a document called Affirming Our Values, a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility.
What prompted it was my hearing from community concerns, if not outrage, with ongoing developments in the United States.
The Minister of Education, Tracy Schmidt, is encouraging school divisions to take local field trips.
There are so many incredible educational opportunities right here in Manitoba, and we would encourage school divisions to follow suit and think about the learning that they can do right in their backyard.
Kreml says he's focused on local travel for students in the division.
We have a great country, and this is also about paying attention to it and supporting our local and national economy also.
The Winnipeg School Division says it hasn't suspended any trips south of the border yet. They're waiting for direction from the province and Global Affairs. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Southwestern Manitoba University students and instructors are sounding the alarm that anti-DEI rhetoric from the United States is hurting marginalized groups. They're doubling down on the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion to ensure nobody gets left behind. CBC's Chelsea Kemp has that story.
I am scared of apathy more than anything else.
Every day is a fight to have our identity valued and recognized, says Brandon University professor Nora Wilson. As a trans woman, she's afraid her rights are becoming a political wedge issue.
We're going to stop the destructive and divisive diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Wilson worries what the ripple effect will be in Canada.
The dismantling of EDI programs down there by the Trump administration has emboldened Conservatives up here to attack EDI even harder.
Sociology professor Arian Hannemeyer says there's a lot of political misinformation about equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's why they're doubling down on protecting EDI at the university.
The students see that we are here, we're listening, we know how they're feeling, we see that they are wondering what is possible, and we want them to know that we're standing with them.
First-year student Eden Lee Mitchell identifies as a transgender man and has autism and ADHD. He feels like every single part of his identity is under attack.
It's worrying to see just because I want my identity to be more important to people than the price of their gas.
Wilson says politicians slamming EDI is a distraction from bigger issues at the expense of hers and others' rights.
We need to come together as a community because community is the only way that we're going to get through this.
This week, Brandon University released a statement reaffirming its commitment to EDI because it's pushing back against harms like colonization, disabled exclusion, and marginalization of people based on their identity, gender, or sexuality. Chelsea Kemp, CBC News, Brandon.
After 2 years of complaints, sidewalks in Winnipeg are in better condition this winter. Public Works officials say weather is the main reason. It has not been warm enough for snowmelt to pool on sidewalks. The city has also made changes to the way it clears those sidewalks.
We added more machines, we added more staff, we've done more training with the operators, and we've decreased the level of centimeters before we go out.
A study of sidewalk clearing in 9 other Canadian cities found more use of salt to melt ice from sidewalks. It's often too cold for salt to be effective here in Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Parking Authority may soon have new tools to convince people to pay outstanding parking fines. The agency says there was about $10 million in unpaid fines last year. It uses collections agencies, liens and seizures to collect on those fines. The Parking Authority is now looking at reporting overdue accounts to credit bureaus and garnishing wages of people who don't pay their fines. Well, happy Valentine's Day,
same
Riley.
to you.
We had some nice goodies and treats throughout the office that people brought in, and it just paves the way for a really amazing weekend with Festival starting today, and everybody really just in a good mood.
Yes. I think it must have been all the sugar in the office today.
Everyone's just on a sugar high.
Exactly. I hope that you are prepared for a bit of a chillier weekend again, like we've seen, some colder temperatures. Certainly if you're heading to Festival this weekend, bundle up because we're in for a bit of a chilly one. Have a look at some of the numbers here. Maybe inside of a tent, not the worst, with some heat and some music and some food and some drink. But when you're outdoors, we're looking at those temperatures staying a good 11, 12, 13 degrees below seasonal as we get through the weekend. So Saturday, minus 19, minus 20s into Sunday, Monday, and our overnight lows approaching minus 30 in Winnipeg right through the long weekend. So we are looking at a below seasonal weekend. But the good news is in the long range forecast, and you'll even see this in the 7-day forecast later on, that the light at the end of the tunnel, the wheels are starting to turn just a little bit. So we'll go into a little bit more detail. You can see that polar jet, that polar vortex, and how it's really sunk down, and that has led to some of this very cold Arctic air kind of halting itself right over Manitoba and northwestern Ontario, bringing some of the coldest air that we're likely to see for the winter months here right over our province, and we're looking at some very cold temperatures right through the weekend. A mix of sun and clouds really across the province today. We did get some clearing later this afternoon, but certainly a cloudier start to the day today. That cloud really ebbs and flows as we get through the day on Saturday because of this system that you may have seen there just skirt along the international border. That is another weather maker that will be making its way into the Toronto area, into the Ottawa Valley, and right into the Maritimes again. So we're dodging another bullet in that regard, but the trade-off is we keep the colder conditions as we get into next week. So you can see, as I've been showing you this week, this blob of cold air just rotating around the prairie provinces. But as we get into midweek, you can start to see that breaking down a little bit as that polar jet makes its way back to the North Pole slowly but surely. And that's going to allow our temperatures to start to warm up as we get into the later part of next week, but certainly into next weekend. We'll start to see some improvement in our temperatures back towards seasonal. Into the morning hours tomorrow, again, another cold one, minus 30 in Swan River, minus 29 in Thompson. You can see where some of that cloud cover will keep things just slightly warmer into extreme southern Manitoba first thing in the morning. Nonetheless, though, below seasonal, Brittany, right into next week. A little bit of cloud starts to build in Tuesday. That's ahead of that change as we get Wednesday and into later next week. Those details coming up in your 7-day forecast.
Okay, by Wednesday, we're going in the right direction.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, there is much more to come after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. The federal tax holiday ends this weekend. The government cut tax on items such as diapers and restaurant meals to provide relief to cash-strapped consumers and to boost business. But was it worth the effort? CBC's Anis Hadari reports.
There are mixed reviews out there about just how much a GST cut changed anyone's shopping habits.
No, not really. It's not like, oh, now I can go for a vacation. Or, oh, now I can buy, I don't know, like a PlayStation.
Well, I guess if I added up the numbers, it would show up. But really, in terms of behavior or buying, it had no bearing.
The biggest difference has definitely been at restaurants. I'm more encouraged to go out to restaurants.
Restaurants like this one agree.
I think it was a much needed relief when they saw their bill. They were very excited to see that tax break reflect on their bill. It was much less than they were expecting.
Industry leaders want the cut to stay to help a sector they say is struggling.
This is actually working and stimulating the economy and providing Canadians with the relief that they needed to be able to treat themselves on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
But the reviews aren't as hot in other sectors. One of Canada's largest payment processors said they saw fewer card transactions in the first month of the GST cut compared to the year before, with Moneris suggesting the tax break didn't boost sales, something predicted by many economists.
You called this a nightmare several months ago. Has the dream come true?
Maine government managed to use several $1 billion in one of the worst ways I could imagine, so I suppose so.
The GST cut was projected to cost $1.6 billion.
We knew that this was going to be an expensive policy with the general idea that it would make people feel like life was more affordable. I think that at a fundamental level, that hasn't shifted.
On top of that, retailers like this one agree this tax break didn't seem to drive spending.
I think it was such a non-starter. I think we didn't feel that it was fantastic or like terrible. It just didn't really do anything.
So by Sunday, say goodbye to the tax cut that just didn't cut it for everyone. Anis Hadari, CBC News, Calgary.
The Buy Canadian response to the Trump tariff threats continues. And for people having trouble determining whether products are Canadian or not, there's help on the internet. The CBC's Vanessa Lee reports.
With the threat of tariffs looming, Canadians are doubling down on buying local.
We see this one is very Canadian.
These Montrealers have created an app to make it easier for shoppers to identify Canadian products.
We saw on social media a lot of different lists of products being shared. They were not always correct, so we thought we had to find a way to centralize all this information.
Buy Beaver is community-driven, relying on users to comment, rate, and share information.
You can scan the barcode, then it will rate the product as either Canadian or not on a scale of 1 to 5, and it will rate it based on where it's made, where the ingredients and the materials are from, and finally, who owns the brand or the company.
Similar apps have launched overnight with a common cause.
And we've got a couple of ratings there. Peanut butter made in Toronto.
The Shop Canadian app already has more than 100,000 downloads.
This was about a week ago, and we were in our kitchen, and I was trying to figure out if what I was eating was Canadian. And I had to jump through several hoops to try and figure out what I was eating. And eventually I came up with the idea.
It also leans on crowdsourcing. Half of the 100,000 products in its database have been reviewed.
But it's cool to see that we're making a difference. I mean, in our wildest dreams, we were hoping to keep a couple $100s in Canada. With the traction we've gained and the people using our app, we're able to do a little bit more.
The Buy Canadian sentiment is having an impact on bottom lines. Family-owned Chapman's Ice Cream says it has seen a bump in sales.
I would say, yeah, maybe 10%. So yeah, very significant, and especially for January, which is typically the lowest sales month of the year.
The creators of the apps know they're not perfect and say they're working around the clock to ensure the information is accurate. A labor of love for their country. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Ukraine says a Russian drone has struck the Chernobyl nuclear power plant's damaged reactor. The strike punched a hole in the protective shell covering the reactor and briefly caused a fire. Russia denies firing the drone. The UN's atomic energy watchdog says radiation levels at the shuttered plant in the Kyiv region have not increased, and that the strike did not breach the plant's inner containment shell. Chernobyl was the site of the world's worst nuclear accident in 1986. Back in this country, the Igloo Company is recalling 47,000 coolers. The issue is with the tow handles. There are reports of fingertip injuries and even some amputations. At least 12 people in the U.S. have been injured. So far, there have been no reports of injuries here in Canada. The company is telling people to stop using the coolers and apply for a free replacement of the tow handle. Officials in Montreal are racing to clear the snow that hammered the city yesterday before another significant storm hits over the weekend.
The race against the clock. We will have 36 hours to grab as much snow as we can.
Plows are still clearing roads after yesterday's storm, which dumped over 30 centimeters of snow. And on top of that, an additional 30 centimeters is then expected to fall on Sunday. Meantime, here on the prairies, extreme cold warnings remain in place in parts of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and into Alberta. Wind chill values as low as -50 are expected into the weekend. Over the last few days, extreme cold warnings have been in place across southern Manitoba and here in Winnipeg. In the city, overnight temperatures have dipped down to -30, with wind chill values making it feel like -44. It's a bitter and dangerous cold. Local shelters are working hard to make sure everyone in our community has a place to keep warm. Glynis Quinn is the executive director of One Just City. Their program, called Just a Warm Sleep, provides emergency shelter when it gets this cold. Thank you so much for joining me. Hi, Glynis.
Hi there.
So, Glynis, how busy has the shelter been this week during these conditions?
We're at full capacity. And certainly there's also people who come in after we're full capacity. They warm up, we phone another shelter, we get them a ride, and we get them to safety.
There really is no break when it gets this cold. What are you hearing from people every day that are coming into this space, not just to use your shelter, but to try to stay warm during the day?
Well, one of the things I've heard is that people say, we can handle -7, but we can't handle this. This is way too cold. And I've heard so many stories of people experiencing frostbite in the past, and certainly they're scared of it to get it again because they've had to have it cut out when their skin has died. So it's a real problem for people right now because in less than 5 minutes, you can experience severe frostbite.
What kind of services does your shelter offer?
Our shelter offers meals. It offers laundry services, it offers hot showers, it offers programs. We do art, we have art for people. We also have movie night, those kinds of things, just things that people can engage themselves in so that when they're off the street, they have something meaningful to do.
You had mentioned to me, too, that this really isn't just about people that don't have a place to stay. There's people that come to use your services for food, for socializing. Tell me some of the stories that you hear from people that you guys help.
Well, we have a drop-in during the day, and that's where many of the people from the neighborhood come. So we serve people who may be food insecure, they may be living on fixed incomes, people may have dependence issues, or they may simply have lost a loved one and are isolated, need some support. They may need housing. So we provide all of those services.
When temperatures are getting as cold as they are, do we have the capacity in the city to really be helping everybody that needs it?
Well, one of the nice things about Winnipeg is that our shelter system works together. So we meet regularly. Every time there is an extreme cold alert, we are meeting again. Yesterday there was a meeting. We have extra foot patrols going around our neighborhoods to ensure that no one is in difficulty. And if they are, they provide some warming assistance for people. So we are doing our best, but it is not good enough. Everybody needs a home to stay in. And certainly with the province's new project in terms of Your Way Home, we're hoping that in the next few years, everyone will have a home that wants a home.
Glynis, what does a night outside look like for people that are experiencing homelessness during a cold snap like what we're dealing with?
Most of them that are like living outside right now are standing around fires because that is really the only way one can keep warm in this kind of temperature. People don't have enough clothing to cover all of their skin. They don't have the windproof outside jackets that they require for this kind of weather. And many of the people we see don't even have boots. They may have a pair of running shoes and that's it.
What is the best way that people can help out during this time and help out the vulnerable, help out places like your shelter?
Help your local agencies. We really need your support. We need boots, we need money, we need all of hand warmers, we need all of those things that can help people.
Glynis, is there anything that really strikes you when you speak to people that you're helping right now?
Well, I was thinking this morning when I came in about how I had a choice of winter coats today, and I was able to put on one that was a little bit warmer than the one I wore yesterday. But our guests don't have that choice. And yet, when I asked them how they were doing this morning when they were warming up, they told me how grateful they were that they had somewhere to come like this. And they took it just in stride, that the cold weather is just something that they have to deal with, that they have to learn to deal with. And really, this is not any kind of weather for humans to be outside.
I think the word you used to me was gratitude, and I think that's something we can all practice a little bit more. Glynis, thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Sculpted to perfection, they're works of art made out of snow and on display for everyone to see. We'll introduce you to some of the artists after the break. Stay with us. A health problem that was all but eliminated in Canada could be making a comeback. And researchers say gourmet salts at the grocery store could be contributing to the problem. Jennifer Yoon reports.
Canadians have so many salt choices now. Kosher salt, Himalayan rock salt, sea salt. None of these have iodine added like regular table salt does. It's an essential but rare mineral needed for thyroid function.
And it's very critical for development.
In Canada today, almost 12% of the population could have moderate to severe iodine deficiency, say researchers. And a new study out of Quebec suggests pregnant women are not getting enough iodine in the first trimester of pregnancy. That could lead to a child being born with cretinism, a condition this Toronto pediatrician was astonished to see in a 17-year-old.
She was about this tall, had the classical face of cretinism, and was intellectually delayed, severe intellectual deficits.
Cretinism is irreversible and comes about when a baby doesn't get enough iodine in the womb. It's very rare in Canada since the government started adding iodine to table salt in the 1950s.
The manufacturing has changed and the diet, people's diet have changed. We're starting to see iodine deficiency again.
Another way iodine deficiency can manifest: goiters.
People alive today were not around in the 1920s. They don't remember what iodine deficiency looked like or, how devastating it was.
The deficiency is also associated with cognitive impairment, infertility, and stunted growth.
So this is how many days worth of iodine?
Roughly 50 days.
But a little goes a long way in fixing the problem, says this researcher.
We need more research and evidence to support practices to ensure that the population as a whole has adequate iodine in their diet.
There are other ways to make sure Canadians are getting enough iodine through mineral-rich food like seafood and dairy, and for pregnant women, prenatal vitamins. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Tomorrow marks the 60th anniversary of the day Canada's iconic maple leaf flag was raised on Parliament Hill for the first time. To mark the occasion, a number of events are being held across the country. Skaters started the celebration today by unfurling a giant Canadian flag on the Rideau Canal. The event also featured speeches and the singing of the national anthem.
True patriot love in all of us command.
Today's event also included dozens of skaters and elite athletes were on hand, as was the seamstress of the first ever modern Canadian flag. Flag Day is gathering a lot of attention this year. In the face of Donald Trump's threatened trade war, all 5 of Canada's living former prime ministers released an open letter urging Canadians to fly the flag this weekend. In 1965, the modern flag replaced the red ensign, which had been the country's de facto flag since 1868. The more you know.
Yeah.
See, we like little facts and
history
stats.
lesson.
Exactly. History lesson that I don't want to repeat is the last week of the cold temperature.
I agree.
Although we know it's February in Manitoba.
And,
so.
Looking at it, good for the river trail.
Perfect,
Good
yeah.
for the outdoor rinks. It's going to keep them nice and frozen for a little while yet, I think.
And good if you're going to Festival, bundle up and
Yes.
you'll get the full experience.
Absolutely. I want to show you the 10-day temperature trend. As I always do when I show this, don't take these numbers to the bank because this is one forecast model's depiction of what could happen over the next 10 days. But I did want to show you some of the hope that we have on the horizon here. So, yes, look at these numbers. I know these are 12, 13 degrees below seasonal for this time of the year, but look at what happens as we get to the end of the month. Yes, these are -1s in the last week of February. So there is some hope there as we see our temperatures inching closer to seasonal. And you can see that line, as I showed you in the long-range forecast, changing and dipping things a little bit further closer to that seasonal mark by the time we get even to the end of next week. So we will start to see this cold lifting. It's going to take a few more days yet, but we'll get there sooner or later. I did want to show you the spread of watches and warnings we have really right through the eastern half of the country here, through the Greater Toronto area, into the Ottawa Valley, into southern Quebec, Montreal, Quebec City, into the Maritimes. This is because of another shot of snow that's coming as we get through the weekend. And some of that will graze parts of North Dakota and Minnesota, maybe even northwestern Ontario. But you can see that main event as it works its way up from Texas right through the Greater Toronto area and through that eastern part of the country, which, as you saw earlier, parts of Montreal dealing with 30 centimeters of snow already and another 30 yet to come by the time the weekend is done. So some very snowy conditions coming to other parts of the country. All right, Feline Friday. This is Omar. Thank you, Tammy. This is probably what I'm going to be doing on the couch this weekend, so I feel ya. Talkback at cbc.ca is where you can send your pictures. Looking at a high of -19 in Winnipeg tomorrow. Winds not all that strong, I know, a bit breezy at times today, but we will see them lightening up as we get into the day tomorrow. Overnight temperatures in the west close to -30 once again, -28 in Brandon, -29 in Dauphin, partly cloudy skies. A little bit more cloud the further south you go in the province, -26 in Winnipeg overnight, -31 in Thompson. Temperatures dipping into the -30s, and that's where we start tomorrow in northern Manitoba, looking at -24 in Thompson by lunchtime, up to -23 by the afternoon. Really doesn't go further from there. Into southern Manitoba, temperatures close to -20. A little bit of cloud cover as we get through the afternoon hours, but we will start to get some sun back, Brittany, as we get later into the afternoon. I'll have your 7-day forecast coming up when I come back.
Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, those big snow sculptures around Winnipeg are back. A reminder that Festival de Voyageurs is here. David McNair and Gary Tessier are part of a team that has created 8 of this year's sculptures. CBC Manitoba community reporter Shannalee Vidal has their story.
Giant blocks of snow just might get your attention, especially when you see how they've been transformed into works of art. I'm Shannalee Vidal, and I'm here at Whittier Park in Winnipeg. That's where Festival de Voyageurs is taking place, but it's not the only place where you can see some of these giant snow sculptures.
Out in Sage Creek, we did a blackbird in the marsh with some cattails. We did the maple leafs at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is basically the maple leafs as Canada with open arms receiving immigration individuals. Then we did a couple for the schools from the kids' designs, actually. We did Groku, who's some Star Wars character I never even heard of before, and an eagle with a nest.
That's David McNair. He's been creating snow sculptures for 38 years. This one on Provence and St. Joseph took 45 hours to make. It's called Le Band, and it's based on a drawing by his sculpting partner, Gary Tessier.
We have a bass player, a trumpeter, a guitarist, and a bongo player, and we've got 2 singers on either end of the block as well, too. Festival is all about celebration, history, and music. And this is sort of a funky way of celebrating that.
The enormous sculpture began as a massive white square on the boulevard. It took a lot of careful work with the right tools to bring out the dimensions of the musicians on each of the 4 sides.
Basically, you do have a couple of good snow shovels, and then garden edging shovels we use to remove some of the larger snow. We also have some homemade tools that are made out of, this is out of a paper cutting blade. You can see how the edge is really quite roughened up over the years because the snow is really quite hard as well. And then you go into just using smaller angular trowels for the corners and everything, and some fine polishing rasps that are basically, that's a nailing plate with a handle on it, and it's really good for polishing your surfaces. Really what you want to create is shadows, and that's what makes the sculpture sing.
My name is Brianne Lavely-Heckert, and I'm the Executive Director of Festival de Voyageurs. It's really a community festival, and we really are part of this environment, this ecosystem in Winnipeg, and so getting to be able to share the joie de vivre through the snow sculptures all throughout the city is part of the job and part of making sure that we get that spirit out throughout the community. I know February in Winnipeg isn't always the easiest time for folks, so bringing that joie is important for us.
Those sculptures couldn't be made without a lot of snow, something that was in short supply last year.
I mean, it's a world of difference. The park is covered in snow. It's not going to be muddy again like it was last year, so we're really happy to have that ambience back. I know that the snow is such an important part of our festival and part of that experience of being out here, and it's part of winter in Manitoba, so it feels good to have things start to feel a little bit more normal again for us this year.
But what's it like to create these sculptures in the bitter cold?
Well, you don't stand around a lot. And sometimes you just got to do a little jig, keep your feet warm, but you know, you're really layered up well. The wind is a bit of a killer, so sometimes you'll just go and work on the opposite side of the block out of the wind. If the sun's out and you're on the sunny side of the block, it's really, really nice.
I've been sculpting snow for 40 plus years, many of the years with David here. It makes the winters go by a lot faster, and we have fun doing this because there's no other medium that we can make something so big so quickly.
David McNair and his team will have 8 snow sculptures in total that are part of this year's Festival du Voyageur. Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Still ahead, finding love late in life, a love story you won't want to miss. And of course, Riley's back with the last check on our forecast. Huge crowds filled the streets of Philadelphia today with cheers and celebration. Fans were hoping to catch a glimpse of their hometown Eagles. They beat the high-flying Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl last weekend. Players rode along and waved from buses, and some members of the team walked parts of the parade route as well. Amid the jubilation, a heavy police presence and dump trucks and heavy equipment blocked many side streets.
Not nearly as cold in Philadelphia as it is in Winnipeg, but you know what? We would still be out in the parade, even if it was minus 19 like we're looking at tomorrow afternoon. A mix of sun and clouds. Wind chill again in the afternoon, close to minus 30. Colder into the morning hours tomorrow. North winds tomorrow, 10 gusting to 20. And look, our sunset is inching closer to 6 p.m. It's feeling a lot brighter into the early evening hours, and I hope that's maybe warming up what will be a cold weekend. Minus 20 into Sunday, minus 22 for Monday and Tuesday, with clouds starting to build in. This signals the change in our pattern here as we start to see things warming up. Minus 17 on the way for Wednesday, minus 15 for Thursday, and Brittany, minus 10 for Friday. So inching closer to seasonal by the end of next week. Well, it is Valentine's Day, of course, a day to celebrate love. It is a special event for New Brunswick seniors Brenda Trafford and David Steele.
So they fell in love later in life after a memorable phone call. Here's your Daily Lift.
Brenda and I got together, and everything's worked out really nicely. We enjoy each other's company. We enjoy traveling together. And I love her because I can go to Fredericton and we don't have to stop for a pee like she does.
The pair met 5 years ago when David began volunteering for Nursing Homes Without Walls. It's a program that matches volunteers to seniors who need support. David had recently lost his wife, and he matched with Brenda for weekly phone calls.
Both said they loved the sound of each other's voices. One thing led to another. They met in person and eventually fell in love. Brenda, who is a widow, says she never thought she would ever find love again.
So you're saying there's hope,
romantic.
right? Doesn't
know.
matter how old you are, there is always hope. There is always somebody that loves you if you don't have to stop for a pee.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's, happy Festival. Stay warm this weekend. We'll see you back here next week.
I'll see you Monday.
It's cute. I like it.